The dust cloud rising from the stage-coach wheels was the only thing between Florence Garrett and complete despair, as she clutched her worn carpetbag and stepped down onto the sun-baked earth of Paso Robles, California, in the spring of 1878. She had left everything behind in St. Louis. Her husband's debts, his mistress, the whispers of the society women who had once called her friend. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago, and the scandal had followed her like a shadow until she boarded that westbound stage. At 24 years old, Florence felt ancient, used up, discarded like yesterday's newspaper. Her dark hair was pinned severely beneath a simple bonnet, and her green eyes held a wariness that made her look older than her years. The town of Paso Robles stretched before her, a collection of wooden buildings baking under the California sun. She could see a general store, a saloon, a church with a modest steeple, and various other establishments lining the dusty main street. In the distance, rolling hills covered in golden grass swayed in the breeze, dotted with oak trees that cast precious pools of shade. Florence had come here because her late mother's cousin owned a boarding house and had offered her work. It was not the life she had imagined for herself when she married Richard at 19, but it was honest work, and it was far from the judgmental eyes of St. Louis society. She walked toward the boarding house, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat beginning to form beneath her high-collared dress. A few townspeople glanced her way, curiosity evident in their expressions, but most went about their business. This was a working town, she realized, not a place where idle gossip consumed every waking hour. Perhaps that would be a blessing. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and peeling white paint. A sign hanging from chains read "Garrett House" in faded letters. Florence felt a small surge of relief. At least her mother's maiden name meant something here, even if her married name had become a source of shame. Before she could reach the steps, the front door opened, and a woman in her 50s emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Martha Garrett had kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Florence, child, you look exhausted. Come in out of this heat." The kindness in Martha's voice nearly undid Florence completely. She blinked back tears as she climbed the steps and allowed herself to be enveloped in a warm embrace that smelled of bread and lavender soap. "Thank you for taking me in, Cousin Martha. I do not know what I would have done otherwise." Martha pulled back and studied her face with concern. "Nonsense. Family takes care of family. Now let us get you settled. You can rest today, and tomorrow I will show you how things work around here. We have 5 boarders at present, all decent men who work hard and cause no trouble. You will earn your keep by helping with the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. It is not easy work, but you will have a roof over your head and food in your belly." Florence nodded gratefully. She had never done such work before. Her life in St. Louis had been one of relative comfort, of managing servants rather than doing the labor herself. But she was determined to learn, to prove that she could stand on her own 2 feet without a man's name or money to support her. Martha led her upstairs to a small room at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for her belongings. A single window looked out over the back garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. "It is not much, but it is yours," Martha said. "Rest now. I will call you for supper." After Martha left, Florence sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. She covered her face with her hands and took several deep breaths, fighting back the tears that threatened to overwhelm her. She had been so sure that Richard loved her, that their marriage was solid. Finding him with that woman, seeing the dismissive look in his eyes when she confronted him, had shattered something fundamental in her soul. "I will not cry," she whispered to herself. "I will not give him that power over me anymore." She stood and began unpacking her meager belongings, hanging her 3 dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her brushes and personal items on the washstand. It did not take long. She had left St. Louis with only what she could carry, abandoning the fine gowns and jewelry that Richard had bought her. They felt tainted now, purchased with money he should have been using to pay his creditors. That evening, Florence joined Martha and the 5 boarders for supper. The dining room was simple but clean, with a long table that could seat 10. The men stood politely when she entered, and Martha made introductions. There was Henry Patterson, a clerk at the general store, middle-aged and soft-spoken. James Wheeler, who worked at the livery stable, young and gangly with a ready smile. Robert Thompson and Edward Morris, both ranch hands who spent their days working cattle on the surrounding spreads. And then there was Austin James. When Florence's eyes met Austin's, something flickered in her chest, a spark she thought had been permanently extinguished. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue, the color of the sky at dawn, and they held intelligence and something else, a kind of gentleness that seemed at odds with his calloused hands and weathered face. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and respectful as he nodded to her. "Welcome to Paso Robles." "Thank you," Florence replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Austin was a ranch foreman, Martha explained as they sat down to eat, managing a large cattle operation just outside of town for a wealthy landowner. He was known as a fair man, good with horses and skilled at his work. The meal was simple but hearty, beef stew with fresh bread and butter, followed by apple pie. The men ate with good appetite, their conversation revolving around work and local news. Florence mostly listened, learning about the town and its rhythms. There was a cattlemen's association meeting coming up, concerns about water rights, news of a new family settling to the east. She noticed that Austin participated in the conversation but did not dominate it. He had an easy way with the other men, neither boastful nor withdrawn. When he spoke, people listened, and more than once she caught him glancing in her direction, though he quickly looked away when their eyes met. After supper, Florence helped Martha clear the table and wash the dishes. The kitchen was warm from the stove, and her hands grew red from the hot water, but there was something satisfying about the simple, honest work. "Austin is a good man," Martha said casually as she dried a plate. "Lost his wife and baby daughter to fever 4 years ago. He was just 24 then, same age as you are now. Thought the grief would destroy him, but he pulled through. Works hard, saves his money, dreams of owning his own ranch someday." Florence felt a pang of sympathy. "That is terribly sad. Life out here can be hard," Martha agreed. "But it can also offer second chances to those brave enough to take them." Florence did not respond, focusing on scrubbing a pot. She was not ready to think about second chances. The wounds from her first chance were still too raw. Over the following days, Florence settled into a routine. She rose before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast for the boarders. After they left for their various jobs, she and Martha would tackle the cleaning, laundry, and preparation for the evening meal. It was exhausting work, and Florence fell into bed each night with aching muscles and blistered hands. But it was also strangely liberating. She was earning her own way, dependent on no one but herself. The other boarders treated her with polite respect, keeping their distance as was proper. But Austin was different. He found small ways to be helpful, carrying heavy buckets of water from the well, fixing a broken hinge on the back door, bringing Martha fresh vegetables from a ranch family who owed him a favor. And always, he had a kind word for Florence. "Morning, Miss Florence. That bread you baked yesterday was the finest I have had in years. Miss Florence, let me get that heavy pot for you. You are settling in well. Martha says you are a quick learner." His attention made her uncomfortable at first. She had built walls around her heart, determined never to let another man close enough to hurt her. But Austin's kindness seemed genuine, without ulterior motive. He never pressed her for personal information or made inappropriate comments. He was simply, quietly kind. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Florence was in the back garden picking beans for the next day's supper. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air had finally cooled to a bearable temperature. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Austin approaching. "Evening," he said, removing his hat. His hair was damp with sweat from a long day's work. "Martha said you might need help carrying those baskets back inside. I can manage, thank you. I am sure you can. But I am offering anyway." Florence studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, thank you." They worked in silence for a few minutes, filling the baskets with green beans. The quiet was comfortable, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "You are from St. Louis?" Austin asked finally. "Yes." "That is a long way to come." "It is." He waited, but she did not elaborate. After a moment, he said gently, "Paso Robles is a good place for folks looking to start fresh. No one here cares much about who you used to be, only who you are now." Florence's hand stilled. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw understanding in those blue eyes. He knew she was running from something. Perhaps Martha had told him, or perhaps he just recognized the signs of a wounded soul. After all, he had been one himself. "Starting fresh is not as easy as it sounds," she said quietly. "No, it is not," he agreed, "but it is worth doing all the same." They carried the baskets inside together, and Florence found herself thinking about his words as she prepared for bed that night. Starting fresh meant letting go of the past, of the hurt and betrayal and shame. It meant opening herself up to the possibility of happiness again. But what if she failed? What if she let someone in and they destroyed her all over again? The next Sunday, Martha insisted that Florence accompany her to church. Florence had been avoiding it, not wanting to face the curious stares and questions that were inevitable in a small town. But Martha was not taking no for an answer. "You cannot hide away forever, child. Besides, it will do you good to meet some of the other women in town. Not everyone here is a boarder or a cowhand." The church was small but well maintained, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the morning sun. Inside, wooden pews faced a simple altar adorned with wildflowers. The congregation was a mix of ranchers, shopkeepers, and working families, all dressed in their Sunday best. Florence sat beside Martha, acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. The minister, a middle-aged man with a booming voice, preached about redemption and the possibility of new beginnings. Florence tried to focus on his words, but her attention kept wandering to the back of Austin's head 3 pews in front of her. He sat alone, his shoulders broad beneath his jacket, his attention focused on the minister. After the service, several women approached to introduce themselves. There was Elizabeth Morgan, the minister's wife, plump and cheerful. Sarah Danvers, who ran the dress shop with her sister. Catherine Reynolds, a rancher's wife with 4 children clinging to her skirts. They were welcoming without being intrusive, and Florence found herself relaxing slightly. "You must come to the ladies' social next Thursday," Elizabeth said. "We meet at the church hall every other week. Nothing fancy, just quilting and conversation." "I am not sure," Florence began, but Martha cut her off. she would be delighted to attend. Outside the church, Austin approached them, hat in hand. "Miss Florence, Martha, fine sermon today." "Indeed," Martha agreed. "Austin, I wonder if you might escort Florence around town this afternoon. She has barely seen anything beyond the boarding house, and I have some matters to attend to." Florence felt her cheeks flush. "That is not necessary. I am sure Mr. James has better things to do with his Sunday." "Actually, I would be honored," Austin said, his blue eyes meeting hers. "If you are amenable, that is." She wanted to refuse to maintain her safe distance, but something in his expression, hopeful yet patient, made her hesitate. What harm could come from a simple walk around town? "Very well," she agreed. "Thank you." Martha gave her an approving nod and hurried off, leaving Florence alone with Austin. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His forearm was solid and warm beneath her hand, and she felt oddly protected walking beside him. They strolled down the main street at an easy pace. Austin pointed out the various businesses, sharing bits of local history and gossip. The general store was run by the Patterson family, who had been in Paso Robles since before California became a state. The saloon was owned by a former gold prospector who had made his fortune and decided to settle down. The livery stable had the best horses for 100 miles around. "And that building there," Austin said, pointing to a modest structure near the edge of town, "is the schoolhouse. Teacher just left to get married, so they are looking for a replacement. You would not be interested, would you?" Florence shook her head. "I have no teaching experience." "Pity. You seem like the educated sort." "I can read and write and do figures, but that hardly qualifies me to teach children." "Out here, that is more than enough qualification," Austin said with a smile. "But I understand if it does not appeal to you." They walked beyond the main street, following a path that led toward a grove of oak trees. A small creek ran through it, the water clear and cold. Austin helped Florence step across the rocks, his hand steady and strong. "This is one of my favorite spots," he admitted, gesturing to a flat rock near the water's edge. "Mind if we sit for a bit?" They settled on the rock, the dappled shade providing relief from the sun. Florence arranged her skirts carefully, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. She could smell the faint scent of leather and soap that clung to him. "Martha told me you lost your wife," Florence said softly. "I am very sorry." Austin was quiet for a moment, staring at the water. "Thank you. It was a long time ago, but some wounds never fully heal. Sarah was a good woman. She deserved better than what life gave her. I am sure you did everything you could." "That is the hard part, knowing there was nothing I could do. I watched her slip away and our baby girl right after. Felt like God had turned his back on me." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the creek. "Took me a long time to realize that sometimes bad things just happen. It is not punishment or judgment, just the way life is sometimes." Florence felt tears prick her eyes. "How did you find the strength to carry on?" "I am not sure I did, not at first. I worked myself near to death, trying to outrun the grief. But eventually, I realized that Sarah would not have wanted that for me. She would have wanted me to live, to find joy again. So I started trying to do that one day at a time." "And have you found joy again?" He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I am starting to think I might." Florence looked away, her heart pounding. "Mr. James, I must be honest with you. I am not looking for romance or courtship. I am here to work and to build a new life on my own terms." "I understand," he said gently. "And I respect that. But Florence, would you mind if I asked what you are running from?" The question hung in the air between them. Florence had not spoken of her past to anyone in Paso Robles except Martha. But something about this moment, the quiet beauty of the creek and the genuine concern in Austin's eyes, loosened her tongue. "I was married," she said finally. "To a man I thought loved me. But he was unfaithful, a gambler, a liar. He ran up debts in my father's name before my father died. When I discovered the truth about him, I asked for a divorce. It created a terrible scandal. His family blamed me, said I was not a good enough wife, that I drove him to his behavior. My own friends turned against me, so I left. I came here to start over, to prove that I can survive without a man to define me." Austin listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he said, "That took courage, leaving everything you knew, or cowardice?" "I ran away rather than face the gossip." "No," he said firmly. "You made a choice to prioritize your own well-being and dignity. That is not cowardice. That is strength." Florence felt something crack open inside her chest, a small fissure in the wall she had built around her heart. "You do not think I am ruined, damaged goods. I think you are a woman who has been hurt and betrayed and who made the brave choice to start over. There is nothing ruined about that." They sat in silence for a while, watching the water flow over the rocks. Florence felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her story had lifted a burden she had not realized she was carrying. Austin did not press her for more, did not offer empty platitudes or false promises. He simply sat beside her, a solid, comforting presence. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, they made their way back to town. At the boarding house steps, Austin tipped his hat to her. "Thank you for allowing me to show you around, Miss Florence. I hope we can do it again sometime." "Perhaps," she said, surprising herself. And Austin, "Thank you for listening. Anytime." As Florence prepared for bed that night, she found herself smiling for the first time in months. Not a large smile, but a small, tentative thing that suggested perhaps, just perhaps, healing was possible. The following weeks fell into a pleasant rhythm. Florence attended the ladies' social and found herself welcomed into the community. The women were curious but not prying, and she appreciated their easy acceptance. She helped with the quilting, contributed recipes, and slowly began to feel like she belonged. Austin continued to find reasons to spend time with her. He would walk her home from the social meetings, offer to help with heavy chores at the boarding house, or invite her for Sunday afternoon walks. Florence found herself looking forward to these interactions, though she was careful to maintain her guard. She enjoyed his company, valued his friendship, but she was not ready to risk her heart again. One Saturday morning in early June, Florence was hanging laundry in the back garden when she heard shouting from the front of the house. She quickly made her way around the building and found Martha arguing with a well-dressed man in a fine suit and bowler hat. With a sinking feeling, Florence recognized him immediately. Richard Garrett, her former husband, stood on the boarding house porch looking completely out of place in his city clothes. His face was red with anger or exertion. She could not tell which. "Florence," he called out when he spotted her. "Finally, I have been searching for you for weeks." Florence felt ice form in her veins. "What are you doing here, Richard? I have come to bring you home. This foolishness has gone on long enough." "I am not going anywhere with you. We are divorced. You have no claim on me." Richard descended the steps, his expression shifting to what he probably thought was charming but looked merely calculating. "Darling, you must understand. I made mistakes, yes, but I have changed. I need you to come back. Your name, your family connections, they would help me recover from my financial difficulties." Florence felt rage bubble up inside her. "So that is it. You do not want me. You want my family's reputation to save you from your debts. Do not be dramatic. A wife's place is with her husband." "Former husband," Florence corrected coldly. "I am not your wife anymore, Richard. I am not your anything. I suggest you leave." "I am not leaving without you." He reached for her arm, but Florence stepped back quickly. The lady said to leave. Austin's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He had appeared seemingly from nowhere, positioning himself between Florence and Richard. His posture was relaxed, but there was steel in his eyes. Richard looked Austin up and down dismissively. "And who might you be? Some backwater cowboy?" "This is a private matter between a man and his wife." "Former wife," Austin corrected, his voice calm but firm. "And I am a friend who is asking you politely to leave. Miss Florence has made her wishes clear." "I do not take orders from ranch hands," Richard sneered. "Florence, be reasonable. Come back to St. Louis with me. You cannot possibly prefer this dusty nowhere town to the life you had." "The life I had was a lie," Florence said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Everything about our marriage was a lie. You never loved me. You just wanted my father's money and connections." "Well, my father is dead, his money is gone, and I am done being used by you." "You will regret this," Richard warned. "Without me, what are you? A servant in a boarding house. That is pathetic." "That is enough," Austin said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "You need to leave now, or I will make you leave." Richard puffed up his chest, but he must have seen something in Austin's expression that made him think better of pursuing a physical confrontation. "Fine. Stay in this God-forsaken place. But do not come crawling back to me when you realize what a mistake you have made." He turned and stalked toward a rented buggy waiting on the street. Within moments, he had driven away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Florence stood frozen, her entire body trembling with the aftermath of the confrontation. Martha came to stand beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, dear?" "I think so." But even as she said it, Florence felt her knees begin to give way. Austin caught her, his strong arms supporting her weight. "Easy now. Let us get you inside." He helped her up the steps and into the parlor, where she sank onto the sofa. Martha hurried to fetch water while Austin knelt beside her, concern etched on his face. "He will not bother you again," he said firmly. "I will make sure of it." Florence looked at him, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "You do not have to protect me. This is not your fight." "Yes, it is." He took her hand gently. "You are my friend, Florence. I care about what happens to you. If that man comes back, he will have to deal with me." Martha returned with the water, and Florence drank it gratefully. Her hands were still shaking, making the glass rattle against her teeth. "I thought I was free of him," she whispered. "I thought the divorce meant he could not touch my life anymore." "And he cannot," Martha said firmly. "He is just desperate and foolish enough to try, but he is gone now, and we will not let him hurt you." Austin stayed for the rest of the day, finding reasons to remain nearby. Florence appreciated his presence, even though part of her resented needing anyone's protection. She had come to Paso Robles to prove she could stand on her own, and here she was, leaning on a man again. That evening, after supper was finished and the other boarders had retired to their rooms, Florence found Austin on the front porch, keeping watch. She brought him coffee and sat beside him on the steps. "You do not have to do this," she said. "Richard is a coward. He will not come back." "Maybe not, but I will sit here until I am sure." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Florence felt the tension of the day slowly drain away. "Earlier, you said you care about what happens to me," she said softly. "As a friend." "Yes. Is that all I am to you, Austin? A friend?" He turned to look at her, and even in the dim light she could see the emotion in his eyes. "You are asking me to be honest." "Yes." "Then no, friendship is not all I feel. I am drawn to you, Florence. From the first moment I saw you, there was something about you that called to me. Your strength, your courage, the way you are trying so hard to rebuild your life. I admire you, and yes, I am developing deeper feelings for you. But I know you are not ready for that, so I am content to be your friend for as long as that is all you can give." Florence felt her breath catch. "I am scared, Austin. Scared of trusting again, of being vulnerable, of letting someone have the power to hurt me. I know. I do not know if I will ever be ready to risk my heart again." "I know that too." He reached over and took her hand, his touch warm and steady. "But Florence, whatever happens between us, whether it stays friendship or becomes something more, I want you to know that I will never lie to you or betray you. You can trust me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "How can you be so patient, so understanding?" "Because I know what it is like to be broken. And I know that healing takes time. I am willing to wait, Florence, for as long as it takes." She squeezed his hand, unable to find words adequate to express what she was feeling. They sat together on the porch until late into the night, holding hands and watching the stars, saying nothing but communicating everything. The summer passed in a blur of hot days and warm nights. Richard did not return, much to Florence's relief. She threw herself into her work at the boarding house and into building a life in Paso Robles. She attended church every Sunday, participated in the ladies' social, and even helped organize a community barn dance in July. And through it all, Austin was there, not hovering or demanding, but present. A steady, constant force in her life. They took walks together, shared quiet conversations, and slowly, so slowly that Florence barely noticed it happening, her walls began to crumble. She learned about his dreams of owning his own ranch, of raising cattle and horses, of building something lasting. He had been saving money for years and was close to having enough for a down payment on a piece of land east of town. His eyes lit up when he talked about it, and Florence found herself caught up in his enthusiasm. She told him about her childhood, about her parents who had loved her but pushed her toward marriage with Richard because they thought he would provide security. About her love of reading, her secret dream of traveling, her fear that she was not strong enough to survive on her own. "You are strong enough," Austin always insisted. "You prove it every day." In August, there was a town festival to celebrate the wheat harvest. The main street was decorated with bunting and lanterns, and tables laden with food lined the sidewalks. There was music and dancing, children running and playing, a sense of community celebration that Florence had never experienced in St. Louis's formal society gatherings. Austin asked her to dance, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. It was the first time she had danced since leaving her former life behind. His hand was warm on her waist, guiding her through the steps with surprising grace for a cowboy. Other couples swirled around them, but Florence was only aware of Austin, of the way he looked at her like she was something precious. "You are beautiful tonight," he said softly. "But then you are beautiful every day." "Austin," she protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "It is true. I know you do not see it, but I do. I see a woman who has survived betrayal and scandal, who has rebuilt her life from nothing, who grows stronger every day. That kind of beauty runs deeper than mere appearance. You make me sound like some kind of heroine from a dime novel. You are a heroine. You are my heroine." Florence stumbled slightly, and Austin caught her, steadying her. Their faces were very close, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Part of her wanted him to, while another part still recoiled in fear. But he did not. He simply smiled, that gentle, patient smile that had become so dear to her, and continued dancing. Later that night, as they walked back to the boarding house under a canopy of stars, Florence felt a shift inside herself. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now, overshadowed by something else. Hope, perhaps, or the first tentative stirrings of love. "Austin, I need to tell you something." "All right." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "When I first came to Paso Robles, I was determined never to let another man into my heart. I thought loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. But you have shown me something different. You have been patient and kind, never pushing, always respecting my boundaries. And somewhere along the way, without me quite realizing it, you became essential to me. Austin's eyes widened slightly, but he remained silent, letting her finish. I am still scared, she continued, her voice trembling. Scared of trusting, scared of being hurt again, scared of starting over with someone new. But I am beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, the risk might be worth taking. With you. Florence, he breathed, and the raw emotion in his voice nearly undid her. I am not saying I am ready for everything, she said quickly. I still need time, but I want you to know that my feelings for you have grown into something more than friendship. I care about you deeply. I think I might be falling in love with you. Austin cupped her face gently with his calloused hands. Then we will take all the time you need. There is no rush, Florence. We will move at whatever pace feels right to you. You would really wait, not knowing if I will ever be completely healed. I would wait forever if that is what it took. But I do not think it will take forever. I think you are already healing, becoming whole again. I see it happening every day. I am scared of starting over again, she whispered, finally voicing the fear that had been haunting her for months. Austin took both her hands in his, holding them firmly. His blue eyes, illuminated by the moonlight, looked directly into hers with such tenderness that she felt something shift deep in her chest. Together, he said simply. We will do it together. You will not be starting over alone, Florence. I will be right beside you every step of the way. Whatever comes, whatever challenges we face, we will face them together. The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Together. It changed everything. Starting over was not about being alone, proving she did not need anyone. It was about choosing the right person, building something healthy and real with someone who valued her as an equal partner. Together, she repeated softly, testing the word on her tongue. It felt good. It felt right. Austin smiled, and this time when he leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Florence did not. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet, full of promise but demanding nothing. It was a kiss that spoke of patience and respect, of deep feelings held carefully in check. When they parted, Florence felt tears on her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of letting go of the past and allowing herself to embrace the possibility of a future. I love you, Austin said quietly. I have loved you for months now, but I did not want to burden you with it. But now that you have opened the door, I want you to know. I love you, Florence Garrett. Not who you used to be, not the society woman from St. Louis. I love who you are right now, scars and all. I love you too, she whispered, and saying the words out loud made them real in a way that thinking them had not. I am still scared, but I love you. Being scared is all right. Love is not about the absence of fear. It is about having the courage to move forward despite the fear. They walked the rest of the way to the boarding house hand in hand, and when they reached the porch, Austin kissed her once more before bidding her good night. Florence floated up to her room, feeling lighter than she had in years. Martha was waiting for her, sitting on Florence's bed with a knowing smile. I take it the evening went well. Oh, Martha, Florence said, sinking down beside her. I told him how I feel, and he said we would face everything together. That boy has been in love with you since the day you arrived, Martha said with satisfaction. I am glad you finally let yourself see it. I was so determined not to need anyone. Needing someone is not weakness, child. We are meant to walk through life with companions. The key is choosing the right companions, ones who build you up rather than tear you down. Austin is a good man. He will make you happy. I think he already does, Florence admitted. The next few months were the happiest of Florence's life. She and Austin courted properly, with walks and conversations and carefully chaperoned picnics. But there was also a deeper intimacy, born of truly knowing and understanding each other. They talked about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Austin shared his plans for the ranch in detail, and Florence found herself getting excited about the possibilities. "What would you think about raising horses as well as cattle?" she asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek. "I have been reading about it, and there is good money in breeding quality horses." Austin looked at her with surprise and pleasure. "You have been thinking about the ranch?" "Of course I have. If we are going to build a life together, it will be our ranch, not just yours." "I want to be a real partner, Austin, not just a wife who stays in the house." "I would not want it any other way," he said fervently. "Yes, horses would be good. You have a good head for business, Florence. Together we could build something really special." There was that word again, together. It never failed to send warmth through her chest. In October, Austin received news that the land he had been hoping to buy was available. It was 500 acres of good grazing land with a creek running through it, oak trees for shade, and enough tillable soil for crops and a garden. There was a small cabin already built, rustic but solid, that could serve as their initial home while they built something larger. "I have enough saved for the down payment," Austin told Florence excitedly. "I have been meeting with the banker, and he has agreed to finance the rest." "Florence, this is it. This is the beginning of everything I have dreamed about." "That is wonderful," she said, genuinely happy for him. But a small part of her felt uncertain. Where did she fit in this dream? As if reading her mind, Austin took her hands. "Florence, I want you to see the land before I finalize anything, because I am not buying it just for me. I am buying it for us, for our future. If you do not like it, if you have concerns, I want to know. You would change your plans based on my opinion, of course. We are partners, remember. Your opinion matters as much as mine." They rode out to see the land the following Sunday. Austin borrowed horses from the livery, and they spent the day exploring every corner of the property. Florence fell in love with it immediately. The rolling hills, the clear creek, the grove of oaks that would provide shade in summer. She could picture it all. Cattle grazing, horses in a corral, a garden near the house, maybe chickens and a few pigs. "It is perfect," she breathed, standing on a hill overlooking the valley. "Austin, it is absolutely perfect." He came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "So you approve?" "I more than approve. I love it." "Good, because there is something I need to ask you." He turned her to face him, and Florence's heart began to race as she saw him reach into his pocket. "Florence Garrett, I know we have not been courting very long by conventional standards, but I feel like I have known you my whole life. You are my best friend, my partner, the woman I want to build a future with. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He pulled out a simple gold ring set with a small but beautiful sapphire. It was not flashy or expensive, but it was honest and real, just like Austin. Florence looked at the ring, at Austin's hopeful face, at the land spreading out around them full of promise. 6 months ago, she would have said no without hesitation, too afraid to risk her heart again. But she was not that broken woman anymore. She had healed, had grown, had learned to trust again, and she loved this man with all her heart. "Yes," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, Austin, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, and Florence felt the last pieces of her broken heart finally knit back together. She was whole again, not because a man had fixed her, but because she had fixed herself, and then chosen to share her life with someone worthy of it. They were married in late November, in the small church in Paso Robles. Martha cried through the entire ceremony, as did several of the ladies from the social. The boarding house men served as groomsmen, looking uncomfortable but pleased in their Sunday suits. Florence wore a simple cream-colored dress that Sarah from the dress shop had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed her with such tenderness that Florence felt her heart overflow. This was what marriage should be, she realized. Partnership, respect, genuine love and affection. Not ownership or obligation, but choice. Every day choosing each other. The whole town turned out for the reception held in the church hall. There was food and music and dancing, and Florence had never felt so surrounded by community and support. These people had welcomed her when she arrived broken and afraid, had given her space to heal, and now they were celebrating this new chapter in her life. As she danced with Austin, Florence caught sight of Martha watching them with a satisfied smile. She made her way over during a break in the music and hugged her cousin tightly. "Thank you," Florence whispered, "for taking me in, for giving me a place to heal, for everything." "You were never a burden, child," Martha said firmly. "You were a blessing, and I am so proud of the woman you have become." Austin had arranged for them to spend a few days at a small hotel in San Luis Obispo for their honeymoon. It was Florence's first time staying in a hotel as a married woman where she felt truly happy and cherished. Austin was gentle and patient on their wedding night, constantly asking if she was comfortable, if she wanted to stop, always putting her needs and feelings first. It was a revelation compared to her first marriage, where her wants had never been considered. They spent their days exploring the town, walking along the beaches, talking about their plans for the ranch. Austin wanted to know all of Florence's ideas, treating her opinions with respect and careful consideration. They decided to start small, with a modest herd of cattle and a few quality horses. They would grow vegetables and maybe some wheat, enough to be self-sufficient. As they prospered, they would expand. "What about a family?" Austin asked one evening as they watched the sunset over the ocean. "I know your first marriage was difficult, but do you want children?" Florence considered the question carefully. "Yes," she said finally. "With you, yes, I want children. I want to build a real family, full of love and laughter, not like the cold, formal household I grew up in." "We will do it differently," Austin promised. "Our children will know they are loved every single day." They returned to Paso Robles and moved into the cabin on their new land. It was rough living compared to what Florence had known in St. Louis, and even compared to the boarding house. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms, with a stone fireplace and simple furniture that Austin had built himself. But it was theirs, earned through hard work and careful planning. Florence threw herself into making it a home. She sewed curtains for the windows, made rag rugs for the floor, and created a small garden plot near the back door. Austin built her a proper kitchen workspace and shelves for storing supplies. They worked together from dawn to dusk, building their ranch and their life. The first winter was hard. Florence learned to handle cattle, to manage horses, to work harder than she ever had in her life. There were days when she collapsed into bed exhausted, her hands raw and her body aching. But she was happy. Truly, deeply happy. She was building something real with a man she loved and respected, and that made all the hard work worthwhile. Austin's boss, the wealthy landowner he had worked for as foreman, sold them a small starter herd of cattle at a fair price. Other ranchers in the area were friendly and helpful, offering advice and lending a hand when needed. Florence discovered a talent for handling horses, and word spread that the James Ranch had quality animals for sale. By spring, they were turning a small profit. It was not much, but it was theirs, earned through honest labor. Austin built an addition onto the cabin, giving them a separate bedroom and a proper sitting area. Florence planted a larger garden, adding flowers along with vegetables, because she believed that beauty was just as important as practicality. In May, Florence realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Austin, and when she did, his reaction made her fall in love with him all over again. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, before carefully setting her down and apologizing profusely for being too rough. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "Florence, we are going to have a baby." "Yes, we are," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed." "I am terrified too," she admitted, "but also so excited." They told Martha first, riding into town the following Sunday. Martha cried and hugged them both, immediately starting to plan what she would knit for the baby. The news spread quickly through Paso Robles, and Florence was overwhelmed by the support and well wishes from the community. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Austin was attentive without being suffocating, helping with the heavy work, but still allowing Florence to contribute to the ranch. They talked for hours about names, about how they would raise the child, about their hopes and dreams. "Boy or girl, it does not matter to me," Austin said one evening, his hand resting on Florence's growing belly. "As long as you and the baby are healthy, that is all I care about." "I think it is a boy," Florence said. "I do not know why, just a feeling." She was right. In late January of 1880, after a long and difficult labor attended by the town doctor and Martha, Florence gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him William, after Florence's father, with the middle name Thomas, after Austin's father. Austin cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he carefully cradled the tiny bundle. "Hello, William. I am your father, and I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life. I promise you that." Florence watched through exhausted but happy tears. This was what family was supposed to be. Not cold duty and social obligation, but overwhelming love and fierce protectiveness. She and Austin had created this new life together, and they would raise him together, with all the love and attention they both had longed for as children. The next few years were challenging but rewarding. Raising a child while running a ranch required constant work and careful planning. But they managed, taking turns with William's care, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and difficult days. The ranch continued to prosper. They added to their herd, built a proper barn and several outbuildings, and even hired a part-time ranch hand to help with the heavy work. William was a cheerful, curious child who toddled after his father from the moment he could walk. Austin was a devoted father, patient and loving, always making time to play with his son no matter how busy he was. Florence would often find them together in the barn, Austin explaining how to care for the animals while William listened with solemn attention. When William was 2, Florence discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace Martha, honoring both her late mother, Grace, and her beloved cousin. Grace was a quieter baby than William had been, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair. Austin built a larger house, a proper ranch house with 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a parlor for entertaining. It was not fancy by city standards, but it was spacious and comfortable, filled with light and love. Florence decorated it carefully, making it a true home. Over the years, they added another son, Benjamin, and then another daughter, Alice. Their family grew, and so did their ranch. The James Ranch became known throughout the area for quality cattle and horses, and for the fair, honest way Austin and Florence conducted business. Florence sometimes thought about her old life in St. Louis, about Richard and the society that had shunned her. She felt no bitterness, only gratitude that those events had led her to Paso Robles, to Austin, to this life she loved so dearly. She had been so afraid of starting over, terrified that she would fail or be hurt again. But Austin had been right. Together, they could face anything. Martha remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting often and being a doting surrogate grandmother to the children. She lived to be 78, dying peacefully in her sleep in the boarding house she had run for so many years. Florence mourned her deeply, but was grateful for the years they had shared. As the children grew, Florence taught them reading, writing, and arithmetic, creating a small school room in the ranch house. Austin taught them to ride, to work with cattle, to understand the land. Together, they instilled values of honesty, hard work, and compassion. William grew into a serious young man who loved ranching as much as his father. Grace was artistic, always drawing and painting the beautiful landscape around them. Benjamin was the adventurous one, always exploring and getting into minor trouble. Alice was the baby, sweet and affectionate, who loved animals and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. The years passed quickly. Florence and Austin aged together, their love deepening with each passing year. They worked side by side, building a legacy not just in land and livestock, but in family and community. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal challenges. But they faced everything together, just as Austin had promised that night under the stars. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Austin took Florence back to the creek where they had first talked about her fears. It was a warm summer evening, and the water sparkled in the fading light. "You remember what you said to me all those years ago?" Austin asked, taking her hand. "You said you were scared of starting over again." "I remember," Florence said, smiling, "and you said we would do it together. We did, and look what we built. A ranch, a family, a life full of love and purpose. I am so proud of us, Florence, so proud of you." "I could not have done any of it without you," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "You gave me the courage to try again, to believe in love and partnership. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," he corrected gently. "That is what partnership means." They sat by the creek until the stars came out, holding hands and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Florence thought about the frightened, broken woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 20 years ago, convinced that her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that the best was yet to come, that pain and betrayal were not the end of the story, but just the beginning of a new chapter. Eventually, their children grew up and began lives of their own. William married a local girl and built his own house on the far corner of the ranch, continuing the family business. Grace moved to San Francisco to pursue her art, though she visited often. Benjamin became a surveyor, traveling throughout California but always returning home between jobs. Alice did indeed become a veterinarian, one of the first female veterinarians in California, and set up practice in Paso Robles. Florence and Austin became grandparents, delighting in their grandchildren with all the joy and none of the constant responsibility. They slowed down as they aged, hiring more ranch hands and gradually turning over the daily operations to William. But they never stopped working entirely, always finding something useful to do, always engaged in the life of the ranch and the community. On a spring morning in 1910, when Florence was 56 and Austin was 61, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunrise paint the hills gold and pink. They had been married for 30 years, and Florence could honestly say that she loved Austin more than she had on their wedding day. That was the thing about real love. It did not fade with time but grew deeper and richer. "I have been thinking," Austin said, his hand finding hers as it always did, "about how lucky I am. I lost Sarah and my baby girl, and I thought my life was over. But then you came to Paso Robles, and I got a second chance at love and family. I got you and William and Grace and Benjamin and Alice. I got 30 years of waking up next to you, of building this life together. That is more than most men ever get. I am the lucky one, Florence insisted. You taught me that love does not have to hurt, that partnership is real, that starting over is not something to fear but something to embrace. You gave me the courage to be myself, to pursue my dreams, to build a life I am proud of. We gave those things to each other, Austin said, echoing what he had told her years ago by the creek. That is what love is, Florence. Two people making each other better, stronger, braver. Two people facing life together. Together, Florence repeated softly, the word still as powerful as it had been that night when Austin had first said it, when he had taken her hand and promised they would face everything as partners. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun rose fully, bringing light and warmth to their land, their home, their life together. Florence thought about the young woman she had been, so afraid of taking a chance on love again. She was grateful every day that she had found the courage, that Austin had been patient enough to wait while she healed. Their story was not a fairy tale. There had been hard times, disagreements, challenges that tested them. But they had faced everything together, with honesty and respect and deep, abiding love. They had built something real and lasting, not just in the ranch and their children, but in their relationship itself. As the years continued to pass, Florence and Austin remained partners in every sense of the word. They traveled a bit, visiting their children and seeing parts of California they had never explored. But they always returned to the ranch, to the land they had carved out together, to the home filled with memories of a life well lived. Florence wrote in her journal every night, recording not just the events of the day but her thoughts and feelings. She wanted to leave something behind for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a record of what she had learned about love and life and courage. Fear is natural, she wrote one evening, but fear should not stop us from pursuing what we truly want. When I came to Paso Robles, I was terrified of trusting again, of opening my heart to the possibility of love. But Austin showed me that real love is not about fear and control. It is about partnership and respect, about two people choosing each other every single day. Starting over is not a sign of failure but of courage. It means being brave enough to walk away from what is not working and open yourself to something better. And when you find the right person, starting over becomes starting fresh, building something new and beautiful together. Austin read her journals sometimes with her permission. You should publish these, he told her. Other women in your situation, women who have been hurt and are afraid to try again, they could benefit from your wisdom. Florence laughed. I am not wise. I am just a woman who got lucky enough to find the right man the second time around. You are wise, and you are brave, Austin insisted. And I am the lucky one. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, their children threw them a large party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors from all over the area attended, along with grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. The house was full of laughter and love, exactly as Florence had always imagined a real home should be. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Florence and Austin stood together on the porch, waving goodbye. When everyone had gone and the house was quiet except for a few family members cleaning up inside, Austin pulled Florence close. 40 years, he said wonderingly. It has gone so fast and yet also feels like we have been together forever. I know exactly what you mean, Florence said. I cannot imagine my life without you. You are part of me, Austin, the best part. We are part of each other, he said. That is how it should be. They continued to age together with grace and dignity. Florence's hair turned completely gray and then white. Austin's once dark hair did the same, and his movements became slower, less certain. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that neither time nor hardship could extinguish. When Austin was 71 and Florence was 66, he began to experience heart problems. The doctor said he needed to take things easy, avoid stress and heavy work. Austin reluctantly agreed, finally accepting that his ranching days were truly over. William ran the ranch now, doing an excellent job of maintaining and even expanding what his parents had built. Florence cared for Austin through his illness with the same devotion he had always shown her. She made sure he took his medicine, prepared foods the doctor recommended, sat with him for hours just talking or reading aloud. Their children visited often, worried but supportive. One night as they lay in bed together, Austin said quietly, "I am not afraid of dying, you know. I have had a good life, a full life, but I hate the thought of leaving you alone." "You are not leaving me anytime soon," Florence said firmly, though fear clutched at her heart. "We have years yet, Austin James. Maybe. But if something does happen, I want you to know that these years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. You made me whole again after Sarah died. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to keep going. Everything good in my life came from loving you." "Everything good in my life came from loving you too," Florence whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Austin, you saved me. When I came to Paso Robles, I was broken and convinced I would never be whole again. But you were patient and kind, and you helped me heal. You taught me what real love looks like. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," he said, just as he always did. "That is what love is, Florence. Equal partners, giving and receiving in equal measure." They held each other through the night, neither sleeping much, both aware that their time together was growing shorter but grateful for every moment they still had. Austin lived another 3 years, finally passing away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74 in 1923. Florence was beside him, as she had been for 44 years of marriage. She held his hand and whispered that she loved him, and she liked to think he heard her one last time before he slipped away. The funeral was huge, a testament to how beloved Austin was in the community. He had been a fair employer, an honest businessman, a devoted husband and father, a good friend. Florence sat through the service with dry eyes, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, drawing strength from their presence. She would grieve, but she would not fall apart. Austin would not have wanted that. In the years that followed, Florence continued to live at the ranch, though William and his wife tried to convince her to move in with them. "This is my home," she told them firmly. "Austin and I built it together, and I am not ready to leave it." She spent her remaining years writing, finishing her journals and compiling them into a cohesive narrative. She worked in her garden, played with her great-grandchildren, and occasionally rode out to the creek where Austin had first promised they would face everything together. She missed him terribly, but she did not feel incomplete. They had built such a strong partnership, such a deep love, that even his death could not truly separate them. He was part of her still in every memory, every habit, every value she held dear. Florence passed away in her sleep at the age of 73 in 1929, surrounded by family and at peace. Her children found her journals and did eventually publish them, just as Austin had suggested. Starting over. One woman's journey from heartbreak to happiness in the Wild West became a modest success, inspiring other women who found themselves in difficult situations to have the courage to start fresh. The James Ranch continued to prosper under William's management, and then his children's, becoming one of the most successful and respected ranches in the area. The original cabin where Florence and Austin had started their life together was preserved and maintained, a testament to the humble beginnings from which a great legacy grew. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set over the golden hills, family members swore they could feel the presence of Florence and Austin, still together, still watching over the land and the family they had built with love, patience, and unwavering partnership. Their story became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story about courage and second chances, about the healing power of real love, about facing fear and choosing to try again. It was a story about a frightened woman and a patient cowboy who found each other in a dusty California town and built a life so full of love that it echoed down through the generations. Most of all, it was a story about the power of that single word, the promise Austin had made that changed everything, together. Because in the end, that was what made all the difference. Not that Florence found the courage to start over, but that she found someone worthy to start over with, someone who understood that true partnership meant facing everything side by side, as equals, as friends, as lovers, as two halves of a whole. Their love story ended not with death but with legacy, not with separation but with the knowledge that what they had built together, the family and the ranch and the example of what real love looked like, would continue long after they were gone. And that was perhaps the greatest happily ever after of all.